I've noticed over the last few years or so that you've integrated more technology into your sets. Elaborate on how you use technology to improve your performances. Do you still prefer to play records, and do you believe it's important to apply the same skills when you're using technology?
Well, it's so interesting because I've actually been playing records. I'm 43 years old now. I actually started playing records back in the late 70s when I was just like 10, 11 years old. So around like 78, 79 is when I first started just like playing around with records and the whole idea of mixing. But I actually got my first pair of turntables and started DJing in 1980. So I've actually been DJing, actually come June this year, it'll be like 31 years of actually DJing with vinyl or just DJing period. But it's interesting because, the technology has changed in such a way where it's even changed the dynamic of what I call the club culture, meaning this. When, as a DJ now going into the average club, anywhere in the world, I've seen this in Detroit, I've seen this in other parts of the U.S., I've seen it in other parts of the world. I've actually gone into certain clubs and they don't even have turntables. I mean, most clubs, the staple of the club was they had the 1200 turntables, they had their mixer of choice, and that was just, okay, that was the setup. Well, now, most clubs are set up for what they call a digital format. Vinyl is primarily an analog format. But a lot of clubs, even if they have turntables, it's set up for a digital format, meaning they have their booth and everything and the sound system set up for, let's say, a DJ who's using maybe their laptop software, Serato, Tractor Scratch, whatever their choice of software might be. So even though they're using the turntables, the record is not actually playing vinyl itself. It's actually just using the record as a trigger to run the MP3. So there's still that digital file that's playing. Or the club may not have turntables at all and they only have CDs. And they have the option for the DJ to either play strictly off CD, which is a digital format, or they can use the CD as a trigger to use Serato or Tractor, which is still playing the MP3, hence the digital format. Well, I know I'm being very detailed in answering this, but I think this is I want to be detailed because it's important for people to understand. I've had so many people say, oh, well, if you're not playing vinyl, then you're not a purist, you're not this, you're not that. To summarize, you're not keeping it real. They feel that like somehow you're compromising the integrity of being a true DJ if you're not playing vinyl. There's some people that feel that. I can see that argument to a certain degree. However, when the dynamic of the club culture has changed, for someone like me, and it has been my experience over the last five years especially, I'll come in, the DJs before me might be playing using their laptops, or they may be playing CD. Now it's my turn to start. I'm playing vinyl, which means now they have to simply generally switch from the line input on the mixer to the phono input. So now we're going from digital to analog. But what happens is, because the system is EQ'd and set up primarily for a digital format, it's not taking into consideration the different things necessary to bring a nice, warm, clean sound using analog. So when I start my set playing vinyl, it could be a number of things. I get feedback that comes in depending on how they have the subwoofers positioned near the DJ booth, or if their monitors aren't, set up correctly. Because vinyl gives you a warmer, deeper sound anyway, it actually gives you about 4 dB of a lower bass signal than with any digital format. that tends to draw back additional, that low signal tends to draw additional feedback when you're playing. Mm-hmm. So what I find is that from a technical standpoint, instead of me just being able to concentrate on my set and mixing the music together, in addition to that, I now have to add the component of trying to EQ and make sure that the music comes across good, that it sounds good. That takes away from my creative ability as a DJ, because now my focus has changed from being a DJ to kind of like being a sound man during my set.
Which was the same thing. Which was the same thing 15 years ago.
Yeah, it's exactly. And so you would think, okay, why is this such a big deal? Well, you have, and again, there's nothing wrong with the technology. The technology is great. However, for people that still love and enjoy vinyl, that aspect has to be taken into consideration of going from a digital format to an analog format. And unfortunately, a lot of clubs don't have the setup to support the analog format in order to bring a crisp, clean sound. The other part of it is, from a traveling aspect, unfortunately, because of the way the airlines are set up now and a lot of the baggage fees and the different things that they tack on to your ticket as you travel, just traveling with vinyl can become quite expensive. The first time I went to Russia, I paid over $200 just for my record bag to travel in and out of Russia. And I thought, man, this is like crazy. I mean, it was more than my luggage, just my regular bag with my clothes and all that. I mean, it was, to me, it was ridiculous. And I thought, okay, this can't go on. Because when you're traveling like that and you have this extra expense, and then you add into the equation when you get there, because people always tell me, oh yeah, TP, don't worry, we want you to play vinyl and we have the perfect sound, everything is great. And then I get there and then I have the feedback and I have to re-EQ, and then I done paid an extra $75 or $100 to bring my records there in the first place. It gets quite frustrating. So, I found myself, wanting to switch to another format, and decided, okay, I didn't necessarily want to go with the whole laptop thing, because of back in the day when Final Scratch was introduced, I saw a lot of DJs who were playing with Final Scratch and their system would crash. And I've had a lot of people tell me, oh, well, there's this parameter or that parameter. Other people had other things on their laptop which caused it to. In other words, there was always a reason. In fact, I even had one guy tell me, he said, Terrence, in 3 years, I've never had a problem. It's never crashed. And 10 minutes later, his laptop crashed. So It's like, so that kind of, made me a bit leery. Now, I understand that, some of the other programs like, Serato and Tractor Scratch, these programs are, better programs, and there are many DJs that don't have those types of issues. But there are other issues. For example, I've been to events where, let's say there are 3 DJs. They're all using some type of software, Serato, Serato, Tractor, or whatever it is. But let's say a couple of the guys have PC laptops and the other guy has a Mac. Okay, well, now they're trying to change and use the interface, and the one guy's finishing his set. He's trying to unplug while the next guy, and it's just like a hassle. So I'm like, man, I don't want to have to go through that, and then the other thing is, which a lot of people don't consider, in the club setting, especially smaller clubs, if you've got a packed house and the temperature gets a little warm and it gets kind of humid, laptops don't perform well in humidity or in deeply humid situations, and they'll automatically shut down. Doesn't matter what you're doing. They'll just automatically shut down because it's not getting the proper ventilation, and it's just not equipped to operate under those conditions. So I've seen people in the middle of a set, it's shut down because of the humidity. So I ruled the laptop thing out. So for me, I thought the best way to go was the CDs, because at least with the CDs, it's more of a hardware thing as opposed to a software thing. I can come right in and play with the CD. I just put the CD in, load it in, and I'm ready to go. I don't have to plug in something and wait for my laptop to boot up, and I don't have to worry about all that extra stuff. It's just I can, go in and immediately start playing. And then the sound quality. Generally, because most of the clubs, as I said, are set up for a digital format, 99.9% of the time when I come in to play, the sound is already nice and crisp. I may have to make just a slight adjustment here or there just to get it the way, I wanted to present the music the way I would like to present it. But it's very minimal in terms of the adjustments that I need to make. And then I can deliver and just play my music and focus on being a DJ rather than being a sound guy during my set. So, for the most part, I know I took a long time to answer, but I wanted to be thorough so that people could understand. It's not just, okay, I just wanted to play CDs because I just wanted to play CDs. There was a very
submission.
there's a methodical, it was well thought out reason as to why I actually switched over from playing vinyl to playing CDs. And I've gotten to the point after, just practicing and, becoming more familiar with the CDJs where I can pretty much do everything that I could do on vinyl on CD. And I tend to find that people seem to find it more fascinating because they kind of expect that, okay, you're a DJ, if you're playing vinyl or whatever, if you come in and you start scratching and doing some things, it's not really a big major shock to your system. But what I find is that people are looking, especially people that are familiar with me, and they see me doing the same thing on CD that I do on vinyl, and they're like, wow, because they're not used to seeing people do that on CDJs. So there's kind of a novelty factor that goes into it as well. So, like I said, I know I took a long time to answer that question, but I wanted to be thorough just so that, people could have an understanding as to how I arrived from going from vinyl to CD.
Now, do you think that the same concepts apply from playing vinyl to playing CDs? I mean, do you find that you are able to translate the same skills that you've been developing over the last 30 years when you're into playing a digital format with a electronic controller rather than using the actual analog tools?
Oh, yes, definitely. As a matter of fact, as most people know with CDJs in particular, there are certain mechanisms, buttons that will allow you to do certain tricks that you could do on turntables. I purposely try not to use those buttons, and I just use the normal techniques that I've learned DJing on vinyl and applying those same techniques to the CDJ, so that people could actually see that I am the one manipulating and causing the music to sound the way that it's sounding, as opposed to me just hitting a button and performing the same trick. I can hit a button on the CDJ and perform the same trick. If I'm doubling or tripling, a particular song, I would do that same trick. Or if I'm doing a beat juggle, I would use the same techniques that I've learned as a DJ playing on vinyl, as opposed to just, programming a couple buttons on the CDJ. It's giving me the same result, but I find it's more entertaining to the audience. And plus, I just prefer to do it anyway because I'm just so used to doing it, and I think it just comes across better for them to see me doing it, as opposed to I'm hitting a button and doing it. You know what I mean? So, I definitely, I see the benefit in translating what I've done on vinyl into, what I'm doing with the in the digital format with the CDs. Absolutely.
Are there any other areas of your life that you apply the same principles as you do with turntablism?
Actually, yes. I mean, just as I was saying, how I try to present, the music in such a way like a chef, presents a meal. I try to present myself that way. And I know it's kind of a weird concept maybe, but in other words, another way, and it's kind of cliche, but a lot of people have said it, I try to put my best foot forward. You never get a second chance to make a good first impression, those types of things. And I know that there are sayings, and some people see them as just, simple cliches, but I really believe that. I think that I try to be the best person that I could be in every area of my life. I try to be the best, father I could be to my children. I try to be the best husband I could be to my wife. I try to be the best friend I could be to my friends. I try to be the best person that I could be to just, fans, people that enjoy my music. I did a party in Ohio just this past weekend, and I was talking to some people there after my set, and they were like, wow, this is so cool. You're just talking to us like a normal person. And I said, well, yes, I am. I'm a normal person. I'm no different than you. I don't see myself being above you or being any better than you, because I know that I'm not. I'm just a normal guy, just like you. I'm a normal person, just like you. The only difference is, I just happen to be this DJ. You know what I mean? And, I recognize that I have some gifts and some talents in this area of being a DJ, but it would be no different than if I went to, let's say, somebody's job and they were, say, this amazing IT person who's able to configure several computer systems and, work out the dynamics of setting up the system and troubleshooting or whatever. I would be just as amazed, like, man, I can't believe, or some graphic artist, or whatever it is. But yeah, it's for me, I try to put the same type of, effort into everything that I do and into being, the person who I am. And just like in DJing, sometimes, the sound system isn't right. In other words, sometimes you try to do the best you can, and it may not come out the right way. It may not, it's like mixing two records together. Sometimes you have an off blend. Well, sometimes in life you have an off blend. But the thing that I would hope is that people, would look and at least say, man, you know what, but, Terrence tried. He wasn't trying to hurt anybody. He wasn't trying to take advantage of people, I mean, we're all human. Everybody makes mistakes. But, yeah, I do try to use some of the same principles. And actually, to be honest, it's actually like a reverse. It's not necessarily me putting what I do with DJing into my life. It's actually putting what I do with my life into DJing.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I see it.
Now, I'm not necessarily a person of faith, but I do believe that music comes from a very spiritual place. So tell me about your spirituality and how that inspires your music.
Well, I mean, I've always been, I grew up in church. My parents, they were very, very adamant about, our family. Myself, my brother, I have an older brother. We had to go to church. If even if we were sick, we had to be like half dead. That's the only way we're not going to church. Other than that, we're going to church. Both of my parents have a strong spiritual background in their, upbringing, and, that's how they raised us, our family. So, I grew up in church and everything, but, and so from a musical standpoint, I always felt there was some type of connection, for me at least, with God, with music. It's kind of hard to explain, but when I play music, when I hear music, when I'm actually creating music, depending on the song, it could touch me in such a way where I feel like there's something spiritual, there's something divine that's actually happening. Like there's something different about how it's affecting me or touching me. And I know that there's a divine presence in whatever that is. And I've always known that from a very early age, maybe 7, 8 years old. I've always felt that. So, as I got older and started DJing and just kind of getting into music itself, that began to grow more and more from the musical side of it. But then, as I got older, I saw some things within the church, and me being young, not necessarily knowing how to process it, but, this is just what I saw. My dad at one time was like president of the church council for a church we were going to. And, so he, that like you have, in some organizations, you have your pastor, you have your pastoral staff or your ministerial staff, but then you might have like a church board or a church council that kind of help operate some of the other ministries, or maybe even just some of the, other aspects of running the church, making sure that, the financial part is taken care of, or, the landscaping and the grounds are kept up, church maintenance, those types of things. So my dad was president of the church council, and to make a long story short, I saw different things while he was president of the church council, where I would, be at home and, we would go to church and I would see maybe Brother John who, greeted Sister Sally, and it's like, oh yes, how you doing? And I witnessed them in church and everybody's friendly. But then, we get home and our phone rings and it's Brother John, and he's calling my dad to say, now, Sister Sally is wrong about doing da 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 da. And he's talking so horribly about Sister Sally, and I'm like, wait a minute, I just saw you greeting them in church like they were such a wonderful. So in my mind, I'm like, you smiling in their face and you talking behind their back. So I had this whole thing. I just started to develop this thing where I just felt like, people in church are just fake and phony, and I don't want to have nothing to do with this because they're all hypocrites. And so around the age of like 13, 14 years old, I saw my dad get so fed up with it that he left the church, period. He was just like, I'm done with this. And that had a profound effect on me. So from the musical side, I still felt that connection. I knew there was something divine going on, some type of connection with God. But in my own spiritual life, I had basically just neglected it. Even though I believed in Jesus Christ and all of that, I hadn't really fully committed myself to having a relationship with God. Well, moving further on in my life, as I started to grow older and become more mature, life has a way of bringing you to God, different things. In fact, I heard somebody the other day, they were talking and a person asked them, they said, well, have you always had this close connection with God? And he said, well, no, I grew up in church, but to be quite honest, I didn't really get close to God until I had a major tragedy in my life. And that generally tends to be, what happens to all of us at some point. Certain things happen, and it just kind of draws us closer to God, like, man, okay, because we have these questions. Well, what happened to me. I had several things that happened, and again, just making a long story short, it brought me closer to God to the point where I actually gave my life to Jesus Christ. I was baptized. I made the full commitment to accepting Christ as my Lord and Savior, and really beginning to grow and having this relationship with God, and beginning to study the Bible and things of kind of like becoming a theologian, if you will, just studying God and life and how all this stuff works and how it works in my life and how it works in the life of other people. And so then as that part of me began to grow, that part began to influence the musical side more and start to help me understand the musical side of what I was doing. So to summarize, I started out in church. I knew that musically what I was doing had this, divine connection to God, but I didn't fully understand it. But then as I grew older as a person and began to mature more, I began to develop more of a personal relationship with God. And through that, it helped me to understand musically what I was doing more. And even though I don't fully understand now, like I still don't, there's still some things musically that happen to me that I don't even understand. And I can only summarize it by saying, okay, I know it's God. At least now I have more of a foundational text to kind of like build and grow on. So I know that where I am in my life plays a big part of what I do musically. A big example, a huge example is that when I DJ, I don't play music that has profanity, no cursing, definitely no music that degrades women. You're not going to hear that from me. In other words, you could bring, if you have kids, you could bring your kids to my set at the festival, and you don't have to worry, man, I sure hope TP doesn't play anything that, I have to cover their ears, No, I play a family-friendly set. Anybody.
No earmuffs needed at TP concerts.
It's all ages welcome. Everybody. My sets are rated G, general audiences. No PG-13, none of that. I'm rated G, just like some of the Disney movies, because now a lot of Disney movies are rated PG-13. But some of these, Disney movies, I'm like that. I'm rated G. So, anybody can come and listen, and hopefully enjoy.
Do you think that does the Christian community accept what you do? Have you ever played like Christian functions?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because, when I first had this thing where I got baptized and I gave my life to the Lord, and, I, thought, okay, well, I'm just going to start doing this for the church. And I had contacted a lot of different churches and ministries, and I wanted to just kind of get involved with, maybe DJing some functions that they had, whether it be fundraisers or maybe their youth group was having something. And I just thought, okay, this is how God is going to, he's going to move me in this direction, and I'm going to start doing stuff strictly for the church and for churches. Didn't happen. In fact, it was the opposite. It was more like they looked at me like I was strange, like, okay, what are you doing? Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, a lot of, ministries even frowned on what I was doing because, their whole thing is like, okay, well, we don't feel people should be in the nightclub atmosphere anyway, so why are you trying to bring that to the church?
Yeah.
But, it's easy, or it's interesting because Jesus said in one of his parables, he said, go out into the highways and hedges and compel them to come in so that my house shall be filled. And what Jesus meant by that was, you don't go to the church and minister to people in the church. Your ministry is out here in the world where the real people are. Jesus, they thought he was a radical, and the religious people of the day, thought he was out of his mind because he was hanging out with the people that were considered unholy, unclean. Then I don't mean just people that had like diseases like leprosy and stuff like that, but he was hanging out with prostitutes, gamblers, drunks. I mean, his first miracle was he turned water into wine at a wedding.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people were like, man, okay, like Jesus turned water into wine. And in fact, the way the Bible describes it, it wasn't just wine. It was like the best wine, because the tradition was you serve the best wine at the beginning, and then when the people got a little drunk, then the guests would bring out the cheap wine because they didn't want to be spending all this money on their best wine. Well, after Jesus turned this water into wine, the guests who were there were like, man, they did the opposite. They saved the best this is the best wine. It would be the equivalent today, like, maybe somebody having like, Cristal or something, flowing at the, but I'm just saying this. So the way Jesus operated wasn't within what they thought was the acceptable religious practice of the day, because he went out to where the people were. And so I actually felt led to do the same thing. And I started to see that people, even though it was a struggle at first, people started to accept me in the clubs and everywhere where I was before. Promoters wanted to have me come and play. A lot of them liked the idea that, okay, man, TP's not playing any foul language. He's not playing any, you know what I mean? And they liked that. So they're like, yeah, and plus, I guess with the unique style that I play music as well, they were just like, hey, cool, yeah, come on. So, yeah, it is interesting. I mean, I have played at some church functions. Some, ministries have, invited me to come play at some of their events. I've actually DJ'd at some festivals. I've actually played at Cornerstone, which is one of the largest Christian music festivals in the United States. Last year, I played at a festival called Lifelight out in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, which is another large Christian festival. And I was actually invited to come back and play again this year. So I'll be playing there again come September of this year. So there are a few, places where, I have played and where I've been invited to play. But overall,
and accepted and well received.
Yeah, it's but it is interesting. At some of the events where I've played at for different churches and some ministries, the people kind of looked at me a little strange, like, what is this guy doing? What is this all about? You know what I mean?
Right.
But I didn't expect, and I don't expect, people within the church to necessarily understand what I'm doing, because I understand that what I'm doing may not necessarily be for them. You know what I mean? What I'm doing is actually for maybe people outside the church who maybe would never step foot in a church at all. And it's not that I come into the club with, my music in one hand and my Bible in the other hand. I don't do that. But and it's not like I do an entire set where I'm playing, all 100% inspirational house music or gospel house music. However, I do play music where some of it is gospel house and a lot of it is inspirational house. And there are some people that will come to the club and listen to me play, and they've never stepped foot in a church, and maybe will never ever step foot in a church. But maybe at that moment, something can touch them within maybe a song that I played or something. Or maybe it's just the conversation that we had, and not even necessarily a conversation where I'm talking to them about God, but we're just talking about music or whatever. And God may start to deal with them in their own way and take them on that journey, which will eventually lead them to having their relationship with God, whatever it is. So yeah, it's been interesting. There's some, like I said, churches where, you know, the events have been okay. I haven't done much, but what I have done, overall has been pretty good. But I would say 99.9% of the bookings and the events that I'm asked to play, they're outside the church for sure.
Mm-hmm. Tell me about the person who, and I know you said you learned how to play when you were about 10, 11 years old. Tell me about the person that taught you how to play records and the influence that they still have on you.
Wow. Well, it wasn't necessarily a person who taught me per se. I'm actually self-taught.
Wow.
Yeah, I actually watched videos of people, like early videos of people like Grandmaster Flash, Jam Master Jay, different DJs, Jazzy B. There's a lot of different DJs from early on in the day that I watched, and I just kind of learned from them and watched them. There was a local group that was very, very popular in Detroit called Direct Drive. One of the DJs, there were two DJs actually a part of that. There's a guy named Mike Clark, who most people know as Agent X, from Underground Resistance and his affiliation with Mike Banks and Submerge. Mike Clark was actually a part of Direct Drive. He was someone, we actually went to the same church when I was young. The same church that my father was president of church council. We actually grew up in the same church. So I knew that he was a DJ, and every once in a while, I would have the occasion to watch him, maybe at like a backyard party or something. There was another DJ named Lenny Barnett, who was a guy that, again, I was able to kind of like watch. And then when I was in high school, now by this time I had already started DJing, but when I was in high school, I went to a basement party in Southfield. I went to Southfield High School, and I went to a girl's basement party. I can't remember her name, but I remember it was a basement party. And I remember the big thing about it was Deep Space was going to be DJing her party. So I didn't know who Deep Space was, but I just was like, okay, and I knew everybody was going to this party. Turns out that Juan Atkins and Eddie Fowlkes were, because they're Deep Space. So they were DJing this party. So I'm like at this basement party watching Eddie Fowlkes and Juan Atkins spin, not really knowing who they were, or, because this was like, 1982 or 83, 82, I think 82 when I first got in high school. And so I had a lot of occasion through when I started playing records, and then as I was developing as a DJ, and I would just go to the parties, just like a lot of DJs do now. I would go to the parties, and I would stand at the DJ booth, and I would just watch. And I'd watch how they move the mixer, and I'm like, oh, okay, that's what they're doing with the fader. And, if the DJ is scratching or something, I used to watch Grandmaster Flash from the videos, and I'm like, oh, man, okay, that's how he's doing this or he's doing that. And then I would just go in my little, setup that I had in the basement, and practice. And I would practice for hours and hours and hours. In fact, my parents used to always have this thing, well, Terrence, before you go in that basement, you got to make sure you got all your homework and stuff done. And I would come home from school, I'd do my homework, and as soon as I got it done, I'm in the basement. And I would only come up to eat dinner, and then after I ate dinner, I was back down in the basement until it was time for me to go to bed to get ready for school the next day. And I did that for years. So, actually there was no, now there's a lot that I learned from different people as far as getting advice, and just, different things to kind of watch for being a DJ. But in terms of technique and learning the mechanics of DJing and mixing two records together and scratching and all of that, all self-taught.
That's great. Um, and I, on a side note, it was the same experience for me, really. When I started DJing in 2006, someone taught me how to count patterns and match beats, and the rest of it was just watching people like you and DJ Soul and other some hip hop DJs as well. And so it's funny how that cycle just continues, especially here in Detroit.
Wow, yeah, it's amazing how it keeps going. And Soul is an excellent DJ, by the way. Excellent DJ.
One of my biggest silent mentors, if you will.
Wow.
I mean, we became friends later on, but at first I just used to watch him a lot. And,
yeah,
like, this
Bill
guy
is
has
a good
everything.
guy, man. Yeah, Bill is a good guy. Good guy.
All right, last question. And this is the question that I always ask when I interview DJs, especially scratch DJs. Qbert said that when he scratches records, he's communicating with aliens. How can you relate to that?
Wow. Yeah, I've actually heard that quote. Yeah. It's well, it's interesting. For me, it's not so much as communicating with aliens, but I liken my scratching to Mixmaster Mike, who, of course used to, do a lot of stuff with Qbert.
Mm-hmm.
He once said when he scratches, it's a lot like being a jazz musician, and the same, if you're like a Miles Davis or a Thelonious Monk or somebody like that, and you're performing a certain riff or some type of abstract movement with the notes, but it's communicating through the music. The music is transcending, which we all know in general anyway. Music transcends any language barrier, which is the beautiful thing about music. I've been to so many different places around the world, and I can play a song that, say, was made here in Detroit, and I could be in Japan, in Tokyo, playing the same track. And even though they may not understand the words, the feeling is communicated. And the people will respond, and I can tell, and even after having maybe conversations with some of the fans, they actually get it. Even though they didn't understand the words of the song, the music and the musicality of it communicated the feeling, right? Well, I kind of see the way that I scratch as going deeper into that communication to people. It's a unique way of just kind of maybe adding some abstract elements to what I'm doing musically to not only get just kind of like catch the attention of people, but maybe to take them on a journey that they hadn't anticipated on going from a musical point of view. So, yeah, I believe that when I scratch, when I play music, I'm communicating anyway. But when I scratch, I believe I'm maybe adding another element to that communication. It's kind of like having your cell phone and you can do some great things with your mobile, just talking on it or whatever. But every now and then, if you need to send that text message, you can send that text message through, you know what I mean? Or you can, send, if you took a photo or something and you need to send it to somebody real quick, you can shoot the photo through. So there are all these other things that you can do with the phone in addition to using the phone for the purpose for which it was designed, and you can communicate, you can get that message through. Well, that's kind of the way I liken scratching. For me, I'm playing music, using the music for the function the way it was designed, but the scratching adds that extra element to be able to communicate maybe the same idea or another idea in a different way that, hopefully people enjoy. and not that I'm communicating any specific message. I leave that up to God, to be honest. I just play the music and I let him do the rest. You know, I'm just the instrument. That's the way I see myself. I'm the instrument. So playing the music, the scratching is all a part of God's instrument, and he plays me the way he wants me to be played. I guess that's the best way I can answer the question.
That's great. Well, I appreciate all your time. This is wonderful. This is a great interview. I'm really looking forward to seeing you at DEMF, and
just the fact that you felt me noteworthy enough to even want to interview me. I really appreciate you making a request and taking your time to speak with me. So it is I who should be thanking you. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.